Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ed Freza. Welcome to tonight's Tessa Multiplex Development Deal Lab Feasibility webinar. We plan on hosting these and have been generally on a monthly basis. And the intent is to bring real live examples of deals currently available to purchase, to invest in, and to apply the feasibility methods that we use day in, day out in our company, in our business. Um, to start, to give you some context, I'll just give you a bit of information about myself, my background, and our company, and the context in which we are providing these webinars. And then we'll go in some detail as to the feasibility um, process itself and the various components and why we have those components. And then we'll actually apply it to a 16-plex in the 416 in the Toronto area that's currently available. And you'll see how we apply those techniques and the reasoning behind it. So I encourage you to ask any questions at the end, just so that we can stick to the 45 minutes or so that we've allotted. Again, my apologies for starting a little late, but I can see that a lot of people are still logging on, and so we're going to start. To start, I'd like to just give you a bit of information about myself and our company as mentioned. So my name is Edward Freza, and I started this business in this business back in '89 when I graduated an MBA, with an MBA, and of course, trying to get a job at that point was great because we were at the peak of the market. But shortly thereafter, we fell into the recession. And those of you that are old enough to remember back then, the bubble in the late '80s was created to a large extent by the Savings and Loan Act that was enacted by Ronald Reagan. And that made money very, very cheap and very readily available. People who had no business borrowing money did. And as a result, we had super inflated real estate prices, which unfortunately led to the recession, the Great Recession of the early '90s, which was the worst economic performance we had in Canadian history, second only to the Great Depression. So that's how I started my career. And I was working for a pension fund. Back then, pension funds predominantly put their money in stocks and bonds, some cash, and only 5% went into real estate. Things have changed since then, and they had zero allocation to multifamily, which now they have changed, realizing that there's an asymmetric return, meaning the returns are a lot higher and they're not having to incur as much risk to get the higher rates. So it's interesting how things have evolved. But that gave me a really good grounding on how the big boys, so to speak, analyze deals. And I've taken that analysis and that um, methodology to the analysis that we carry out in our practice today. So I found myself with the rest of our department unemployed. And so luckily I had my real estate license and I got to work. So that was my first and only salary position. I made the transition to 100% commission, and I've been working ever since as a commercial broker. Along the way, I realized that even though I enjoyed selling real estate, I enjoyed owning it even more. And I started seriously in investing and creating my own portfolio of multifamily properties around 2003. And starting off with a lonely bungalow and creating a basement apartment, I've grown that to a portfolio now. My largest property I bought was a four-story, 31 unit apartment building, which I still own, and that I bought just before COVID. Luckily, I didn't buy anything since COVID because we all know what's happened since. But along the way, I also wanted to give back, and so I've been an instructor of real estate courses at the Toronto District School Board, TDSB. And initially, it was real estate investing, but now um, it's dealing with missing middle and development. And we've seen a significant rise in the number of students taking that course because of the interest in this space. This is an example of our typical classroom size. We have both in-house TESA course as well as a more um, um, a simpler version with the TDSB. If this is something that might be of interest to you, by all means, reach out to us and happy to give you more information. In terms of our company, TESA has four divisions, and this is relevant because we have the ability to tap into various sources of the development process to find out real numbers in terms of um, acquisition, purchase price, closing costs, entitlement, construction, financing, etc. So we bring these various elements of the development process together, and I think that is relevant because it allows us to perform the financial analysis, the feasibility analysis with a lot more insight rather than guessing and using industry averages. So a bit more detail to scratch the surface on each of the four elements. We have the brokerage side. We've been in business since 2006 when it was established. Unlike residential agents, we work on the numbers of a property. So we look at the number, we look at a property in terms of what its potential can be, what it is right now, but more importantly, what it could be. And numbers fare very prominently in that decision making. We also have the development side, and that is looking at a property and looking at it from the perspective of, well, what does the municipality think about this property in terms of its zoning, in terms of its policy, and to try and look at that property in context of that and seeing what the highest and best use could be specifically with multifamily. So we would look at that and derive the highest and best use and recommend that to a client. And then from there, we would also be able to then do the massing, which is the fancy word for figuring out what is the optimal sized cube that we could put on this property. From there, we would be able to generate the types of units, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, the GFA, which then becomes very prominent in the calculating and estimating of the construction, both hard and soft costs. What is unique to the construction aspect now and what we are able to do in-house is because we have this in-house manufacturing, we call it Tesla Skeleton. And so there's something called light steel framing. And this is something that's been around for a long time. It's used quite prevalently around the world and even here in Canada on the commercial side, on industrial side, but not so much really on the residential until recently. And the reason is, as you can appreciate, if you're building a single family home, yes, there's fire safety concerns. You now take a property and start putting families on top of each other, and you can see that fire safety becomes even more relevant. And so now it's been mandated that if you're building these missing middle properties, the load-bearing walls have to be non-combustible. Now, of course, you can use concrete, you can use cinder blocks and other methods, more expensive. And so this is where LSF is really coming into the fold because it offers a very cost-effective means to achieve those fire code regulations, yet keeping the costs as low as possible. So this is an example of our project diversification to say of the 100 or so projects that we've done in the past, we've crossed various different types of properties. Here we're showing you a property that we're currently working, finishing off a 10,000 square foot high-end custom home in Richmond Hill. We've done multiplexes, garden suites, additions, extensions, done retail. An example on the right is a build out of a cosmetic clinic. On the left there, build out of a office space. We've done a gas bar, gas station, and we're also working finishing up on a 30,000 square foot industrial. So that's kind of our past, if you will, but what we're really focusing right now and going forward, and I think many others are trying to pivot in the same manner, is in the missing middle. And so right now we're working on a 12-plex with a ground floor retail commercial component, as well as a 65 unit apartment build, purpose built. Now, bigger does sound better and does have an ego element to it, and this does have a sexier sound to it. But we're finding the smaller buildings are more profitable in the sense that speed to market is the essence of this business, and repeatability allows for expertise, meaning rinse and repeat, building the same 4+1 building over and over again will allow you to build it quicker, cheaper than if you put all your eggs in one basket and try and build one bigger building. So this is one of the kind of classic mistakes we see with clients coming to us where they want to start off really big, thinking that really big will mean more profit, and that is not necessarily the case. We can show you examples where a 4+1 will be more profitable than a 6+1. So I'm just pointing that out because this can be a daunting business. It's certainly a very capital intensive business, but it can be daunting because the numbers are big and people feel that they have to move to a larger building to make sense, and nothing could be further from the truth. I mentioned Tesla Skeleton, and this is the LSF. It's something that is relatively new to the missing middle space, to the residential side of things and to give you an idea of what it looks like and how it works. On the left is a roughly 6 foot tall building that we built, a little model, if you will, 4 feet by 4 feet. And if you look at the right side, it's a close up of what it actually looks like. So you'll see divots, and these divots are these divots allow for drywall to be put without it sticking out. So it allows for a flat surface so that there aren't any issues. Um, and this gives you a close-up in terms of the load-bearing framing. So you can see how it actually looks on a site. The machines that we use, these roll forming machines, it starts basically by inputting the structural plans. The technician rather inputs the structural plans into a computer, which then analyzes it and then creates the models, the pieces that need to be constructed. So you can see it's a series of rollers, and the machine at one end feeds or spools the galvanized metal into the machine, and then there's a series of hydraulics, if you will, with rollers that each one sequentially imposes more and more pressure until you have the final fitted piece, formed piece, which also has holes punched into it to allow for conduits, the plumbing, the electrical, etc. The other element that we have is Tessa Capital, and this is the financing aspect, specifically the CMHC MLI Select financing, which is a crucial element to the missing middle. Why? Because without this more lucrative financing that the Canadian government has unveiled, it's difficult to make these projects work. So what CMHC MLI Select does is it encourages developers to build sustainable buildings, sustainable meaning and defined either they're more energy efficient than OBC, Ontario Building Code, or they are buildings that have affordability or accessibility. And these are buildings that the government would like to see more buildings built like that. And so they offer this incentive, and you can get points based on the element or the degree of energy efficiency, affordability, accessibility that your building has, from 40, 45 to 50 years amortization. So that's quite attractive, and also you get very attractive interest rates. So right now you could get about 3.9% on the takeout, and you could go up to 50 years, as I say, depending on the um, degree of energy efficiency, for example, your building has. But then also you can go up to 95% loan to cost, not loan to value, loan to cost. So in a simple example, if we had a parcel of land for 1 million, you spent say 2 million on hard and soft costs, construction costs, for a total project cost of 3 million. Theoretically, you could go up to 95%, meaning you could own this brand new building with only 150 grand in the deal. So that is what really drives this and what makes this very, very attractive to a lot of people. The uh, services that we offer, and as I mentioned, we are a full service development company, basically is the 8 that we show there. Right from the get-go, we take clients through the capital structure. Financing is critical to understand what you can afford, but then also what does the project pencil out at. You don't want to start a construction or development deal without knowing going in before you spend any money, even on construction, if you know exactly what the end result will be. So number one, capital structuring is critical. Number two, we only now start looking at properties and selecting sites that might be suitable and doing the due diligence. Thirdly, entitlement. And this is basically to take that piece of land and to see, well, what does the city think we should be able to build there? What does the city allow us to build? And this is where we start going into as of right or into committee of adjustment and seeking minor variances. There's also the opportunity to go into maximum development, which we don't recommend. This is where you're going for either official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendments. You're going for maybe even site plan approval. These are not areas where we would suggest somebody just starting out go. Your safe bet is to go as of right, which means you can theoretically go straight to building permit, or to optimize the site, some minor variances of sorts that your designer, your architect would tell you that, if you got these minor variances, it would appreciably increase the value of the property, and it's worth going for. High probability of cases they are accepted, so it's just a matter of paying the fee and going through the few months. So that's the entitlement process. Our design team then would take that site with the entitlements and come up with the massing. Massing, again, I mentioned earlier, is just a fancy word for what is the optimal cube, square box, or cube box that I could put on this site, and where on that site can I build it? And from there, we would get, again, how many units, what size of units, and what's the total gross floor area that we would have. That, again, becomes very critical in our calculations for hard and soft costs. I've put there number 5 LSF design. It's at the very design element, design point that we are introducing the LSF. You don't want to do this after the fact. Now, we do have clients that only engage us for the LSF, and they will bring their structural drawings to us, and we'll work with that. But typically, when we work with clients, we bring that into the fold at the design stage. We also work then on applying, submitting, and getting the approval for the building permit. And then, of course, construction either as a fixed cost or cost plus type of contract. And then last but not least is stabilization. Stabilization probably is the most important element. Why? Well, nobody wants a vacant building. A vacant building is a liability. So the real asset in this whole thing are your tenants. And understanding the site, understanding the demographics become paramount because it's the tenants and the ability to get that optimal rent from that tenant base into your building, and designing a building that will attract the best tenancy, and best tenancy meaning the tenants that are most suitable and paying the highest rent for you are the ones that will give you the highest value for your building. So identifying that tenant base early on, and then understanding what the stabilization looks like in terms of the NOI will then translate into the value that the building has, which then CMHC will look at in terms of the valuation, determining what the max loan amount will be. So you can see there's a lot of moving parts, more so than buying an investment property. There's a lot more, as you can see, in developing a fourplex than going out and buying an existing ready fourplex. My apologies. You can probably see there's a lot of green squiggles. I have no idea how to get rid of it, and I don't want to waste any time and potentially terminating the webinar. So I'm just going to continue with that. And again, my apologies for that. I'm not sure if I did it with my mouse here inadvertently, but hopefully you can see past that. So next question, of course, is, well, who is this webinar for? And there's a whole host of people, and I'm sure that many of you will relate to at least one, if not more, of the categories that we've identified there. So you could be a Toronto property owner, and you're just curious, hey, I've got a property, I bought it a while ago. Maybe it's a property that I bought as my principal residence. Maybe it's a property I bought as an investment. What is the development potential? Let me know what I can do with this property. Is it even worth? So this is a critical question that a lot of people who attend our webinars are asking. We're also dealing with investors who in the past would have gravitated to pre-construction condos, to flipping, things of that nature. Well, those avenues have closed on them, and so now they're looking at getting into the Toronto multiplex development scene and trying to figure out how this works, and is it something that would suit them. We're also seeing custom home builders who in the past, of course, could build on spec, and even before they finished would be able to find a suitable buyer. Regrettably, the market has changed significantly that very few people are willing to take that risk. We're dealing with also with existing developers who were looking at longer projects, but realize that there's a lot of risk. And so these missing middle projects, the smaller ones, allow you to get very comparable returns as the bigger projects, but you're turning them around a lot quicker. And that de-risks the project because you're not tied up for years. You can be in and out in 18 months, 24 months or less. We're dealing with realtors who are looking to educate themselves so they can educate their clients, and a way to differentiate themselves. We're looking at downsizers, people who have lived in our home for many years in a neighborhood they quite frankly don't want to leave. And they're trying to figure out how to house hack, a term that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you're not, but it basically refers to how to use your asset, your home, as a way to generate ancillary income that will then allow you to live for less or for free if you have enough of a positive cash flow there to offset expenses. So what does that look like? Well, it could mean converting your basement that you are no longer using into a legal basement apartment. It could mean putting an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, at the back of the property. It could just be as simple as Airbnb. So we have people that are retiring and that are looking at ways to stay in their home in ways that in the past was not available. And now, because of Bill 23 and this MLI Select, are opening options. We're also seeing those same downsizers who, for reasons maybe they can't afford to stay where they are, maybe they don't want to stay, but they certainly don't want to live in a condo, in a square box in the sky, where they're losing out on their neighborhood, and more importantly, they're losing out on reaching out to neighbors and the family and friends they've had by being isolated that way. We're dealing with architects and designers and other service providers that are looking for ancillary ways to make money and to feed their business. Mortgage brokers as well, who are looking to tap into the CMHC MLI Select product. And of course, landlords of existing multiplexes to figure out, is there any space on my site where I can add one or two or more units? So this gives you an array of the various types of people that we know are interested in these webinars and who have reached out to us in the past. Next question then is, well, if these are the people that are approaching us and that are interested in these webinars, what are the typical questions that are top of mind? So first and foremost, and this is not in any particular order, but first and foremost is, does the site that I have or I'm thinking of buying, does it make any financial sense? They're looking for return metrics like the debt service coverage ratio, return on investment, return on equity, and IRR. How do you calculate them, and what do those numbers look like for our particular project? They're looking for a massing design and a unit count, and they want some sort of a sanity check to see that the numbers they've created aren't pie in the sky and actually have some reasoning and logic behind it. They're unsure about this new CMHC MLI Select product. Are they eligible for it? And how does the project they have in mind qualify for the project? So one of the factors that one has to be aware of is CMHC MLI Select has this requirement that the borrower has to have a net worth equal to or greater than 25% of the project cost. So again, going back to that hypothetical example where we've got a $1 million parcel of land, we're going to spend about $2 million in hard and soft costs for a hypothetical $3 million project cost. 25% of that would be 750 grand. So you would need to show 750 or more as net worth. Now, most of us have that tied up in our principal residence, so that would probably not be an issue. But again, being aware of these requirements is all part and parcel of understanding whether a site makes sense for you. Number 5, they want certainty on the equity and financing requirements. I just talked about net worth, but CMHC equally has requirements on liquidity, on equity, and what amount of equity you need to put in and leave in the deal until it's fully completed, construction completed, stabilized, and where they're now finally going to take you out with a permanent or takeout financing. So throughout the whole process, CMHC wants to see that you've got a minimum amount of skin in the game. And what is that, and how does it look like in terms of the dollar figure? People who want an accurate pro forma. We find that from clients who are very numbers oriented. They drive down straight to the pro forma, which is smart because it's all numbers oriented. People who want an easy to compare redevelopment options. So every single site usually has more than one redevelopment option. It's figuring out what development options are and then zeroing on the one that makes the most sense, not just financially, but perhaps makes most sense for the time that we're in, or for what's happening in the area, right? So these are the ways that we look at these projects. Clients who want to avoid costly dead-end sites, meaning you tie up a property, you're emotionally and financially tied to it, and you're kind of trying to make it work because you have all this expenses tied up, and you're kind of working backwards. And so having this kind of understanding before you've committed a lot of money is very beneficial. People who want instant ways of screening a site, and we can provide rules of thumb to quickly allow you to either determine that the site makes sense or doesn't make sense on a very high level, and then decide to spend more time and money, resources in getting surety on that site. So in essence, people who want a clear go, no go decision. And that's basically the mindset of developers when it comes to a particular site. Does it make sense, etc. So this is the way that we see people typically pursuing this, the answers to these questions. And the idea is, first of all, they gravitate right away to a site instead of spending time with a mortgage broker that specializes in MLI Select to understand what their resources are and available to the project. They start off by looking at a property and then reverse engineering. They may go to residential agent, which the agent may not be familiar with the financial and the investment grade type analysis that's required. Or they might hire an architect and designer to find what can I build, only to find out that the site is too small or it's too too big and doesn't make financial sense. We have quite frequently downsized projects on a site because you can only get so much rent for a particular unit, and making it any larger is not going to get you more rent. So the sweet spot is to find out what size do I need to build it and no larger, because every square foot of excess space that doesn't generate income is not in your best interest and it's costing you money. So there's that determination, and that likely is not something that's done subjectively. It's done very easily with detailed Excel spreadsheets. So the result of the typical path that people delve into when they're first starting is to do what I just pointed out. And the result is that a lot of money is spent, a lot of time is spent, and often that cannot be recouped. To give you an idea of some of the data that needs to be gathered so that you can actually put it together to come up with a yay or nay, a yes or no decision. On the left, I've given you an idea of some of the data required, what, and on the right, how are you going to get it, the service providers and professionals. So you can see that it's not a one person fit all. You're likely going to have to talk to a lot of different types of people if you're starting this on your own to try and come up with enough information from enough service providers to get a picture. And the question that we ask ourselves is, there must be a way to make this a lot more streamlined and a lot less expensive. And so, given that we do have these four divisions, we came to the conclusion that there is a TESA integrated solution where we can bring in the information, the practical real world information we get with working with our clients on these four different levels to come together in creating a feasibility study, which will be a lot more cost effective and a lot quicker than people going out on their own and trying to figure out the answers on their own. So we provide this feasibility study. It does three things: assesses the site for multiplex potential, and then defines what type of multiplex. Is it a triplex, fourplex, eightplex, and what kind of units? Secondly, complete a pro forma. It's all about the numbers, and come up with a pro forma that is defensible and that is based on market realities in terms of achievable rents, proper entitlement, and figuring out what exactly can be factored in the site, etc. And then we provide a analysis of the numbers. What do they mean in terms of sensitivity analysis? What happens if rates go up by a certain amount? What happens if your construction costs go up? What happens if you get a delay? So that it's not just about the numbers, but then also understanding the process of the whole development. And is this something that you're willing to take on? So there's 5 key deliverables or 5 elements to the feasibility study. Number 1 is due diligence, understanding what the site will and will not permit. And this is a reviewing of the zoning and policies. Number 2, a development massing design. Now we know what we can build. The question is, what is that hypothetical cube that we can build, and where on that site can we put it? From there, we now know the size and the unit types. So now we can go into the immediate neighborhood and find out, well, what are the likely market rents that we could generate for those units if we decided to build them. We then take those market rents plus our knowledge of construction costs, soft costs, etc., and the financing elements, and put it together in our pro forma. And with that pro forma, that generates an executive summary where we have a conclusion and then an explanation of what do these numbers mean and what is a likely course of action for somebody that wanted to proceed. So breaking those 5 elements into a bit more detail to understand, a better understanding of what's behind the scenes. In the due diligence, we have all these layers that the municipality has imposed on us. So there's the various wards and neighborhoods. So you probably are familiar that there are 9 wards in Toronto in the 416, which give you more than the as of right of 4plex. You can go straight to 6plex. So most of you are familiar that Doug Ford with Bill 23 said, hey, all the single family homes in Ontario now, you can build a triplex. In 416, you can build a 4plex. In these 9 specific wards, you can go straight to a 6plex. And if you're within 500 meters of an MTSA, a major transit station area, which we'll talk about later, you can go to even greater numbers. And hence, that's one of the reasons why on this site that we're going to present to you tonight, we can go to 16 units. So this is what's happened that's really exciting in the last few years. There's been more changes to policy and zoning in the last 2-3 years than in the last 20-30 years. And that's why a lot of people are taking note. Not many people understand this fully, and that's why a lot of people are taking note and taking the time to educate themselves on what this all really means and how they can take advantage or how they can take this and help their clients. So I've listed only some of the many different layers that your property has to pass, and we pass it through all these layers to see and filter through all this to see if there's any red flags that come up. So things like official plan, ZBA, TRCA, the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority. What if your property's in the floodplain? What's if it historically designated? What about archaeological concerns? What if there was a cemetery nearby or something? So all these issues we have to pass and filter through all to make sure there aren't any issues that will come and install the project later on. As the saying goes, buyer beware. You're buying this property, we don't know anything about it, and it's our responsibility to get ourselves up to speed of what is permitted, what is not permitted. Part 2. Well, the question now becomes, what can you build on the property now that it's past the due diligence and the massing, but more importantly, how do you want to proceed? We are all different by nature, and all of us have different risk tolerances. Some of us are very risk averse, and so our development path might be to say, you know what, give me the safe route. Give me what is as is, what's given to me. I'm going to go straight to building permit. I'm not going to push the envelope. Others like to push the envelope, and so we would go in option 2. Oftentimes, we recommend clients go in the option 2 method because for a minor variance to the design, we could see that there is an unusually greater benefit in terms of returns. So a little bit of time, a little bit of money to get through the committee of adjustment results in big results. Now, how do you figure that out? Well, it's not your job to figure that out. That's why you have your service providers and professionals to determine what the dollar amount is, the cost of going through that, and the potential benefit, and the probability of winning. Part 3 is the market rent study. So again, in parts 1 and 2, we've now figured what we can build in terms of the size and in terms of the number of units. And now we go to the marketplace to find out, hey, if we built this and we were ready now to rent it, what kind of rents could we garner for those particular units? Now, as we get smaller and smaller units, you can see that the price per square foot will start to increase. And we're seeing prices are much higher in downtown core, as one would expect. We're seeing some ADUs, some accessory dwelling units, say 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, achieving up to $6,000 in rent. So some really cool stuff is happening out there that is creating new boundaries, creating new opportunities for those that are willing to get into this space. Um, Part four, the performa. We now take those rents and our knowledge of hard and soft costs and the costs associated with the development process and the financing. And there's three milestones of the financing. Number one is the financing of the acquisition of the property. Number two is the construction financing, and typically we're able to get clients 100% construction financing. And third, which is what people are really interested in, is the CMHC MLI Select takeout. So at the very beginning, we take people, package the whole deal, and take it to CMHC. They then in turn will review the deal, and if everything is to their satisfaction, they will issue a COI, which is a certificate of insurance. Again, CMHC is not a lender, but they're a quasi-government arm that insures mortgages. And so once you have the COI, you basically have your project figured out. You know that if you meet such and such targets, you're going to build for this price, you're going to achieve these kind of rents, you're going to deliver a fully leased building with the following net operating income, et cetera, et cetera. They in turn will honor their side of the bargain and give you a known mortgage at a known amount, et cetera, et cetera. So this de-risks the project a lot. And this is part of the financing modeling that I'm showing on the upper right there. In the past, a lot of people chose not only to get the CMHC MLI Select takeout financing, but also use them for the construction financing. It's a bit longer, it's a bit expensive, but people found comfort in using them because what happens is that you now have a grandfathered, and should CMHC at any point during construction change their goalpost as to what constitutes efficiency or what constitutes accessibility or affordability, it doesn't matter. You're grandfathered in. But you're trading that surety with a longer process, and we're finding that more and more people are just saying, you know what, I'm going to go conventional, private for construction financing, and I'll deal with that, and I'll deal with CMHC MLI Select when I'm fully finished. And this way, it shortens the project and it makes it less expensive in many ways. Now we have the performa completed, and this is where we come up with an executive summary and provide that to the client. So how do we take all this now and apply it to an actual deal? And this is what the second part of the presentation is all about. So here we have an actual property. It's in Toronto. What's critical about this is that it's in an MTSA. It's a major transit station area. And what happens is if you're in a major transit station area, you are afforded some benefits. And those benefits are, number one, you can build without any parking. You can build with higher density. So all of a sudden, a good thing now becomes even better. So we've taken this particular property and we've run the numbers through it. So nothing fancy. It's an old building, built 1926. So in many respects, it's at the end of its economic life. It's a generous 50 by 120 foot lot, which is not too difficult to find in the Toronto area. As far as the official plan, it's designated as neighborhoods, which is a check. In terms of secondary plan, there isn't any, check. The zoning bylaw is 569/2013 without exception, so that's good for us. We've got a zoning designation as residential detached, which is by far the most common. So again, that's good. It would have been better if it's, say, an RM, which is residential multi, but majority of the properties in the neighborhoods for Toronto, something like 70% of Toronto is in the yellow belt, which is the neighborhoods residential, and most of those are RD. So the point being is we picked a deal here that is very, very prevalent. RD is the most prevalent zoning, residential zoning that you'll find. You might, as you're doing your own analysis, come across a zoning that has numbers after it. Like in this case, it's F15. And what that means is if you want to sever this, the resulting pieces have to be no less than 15 meters in width. Well, 15 meters is about 50 feet. And it's 50 feet right now. So therefore, we know just at a very quick glance, you cannot sever this. So these are some of the tips and tricks that you would learn in quickly identifying properties, whether there's a severance possible or not. It's interesting thing with severance is that it's a quick way to add value to the project. So by severing, you're adding value. Yes, it costs some money, but you're adding value, and now there's a possibility of not just adding value through the severance, but now having added value from a development perspective. So here's the development opportunity. It's a four-story building, 16 units, so basically 4 units per floor. There's nothing on the ground floor. You can see at the bottom is a two-car garage door. So we would have parking for 2 cars. You would walk up the stairs, and that would be the way you enter the building. So as I say, approved zoning certificate for 4 stories, 16 units. Now, you might ask, how is it that you were able to get 16-plex approved? And I'll get to that in a second. But that's one of the sweet spots of this particular property, and I wanted to explain that, and I'm going to do that in the following slides. But before I start, just to give you an overview of what the site looks like, as I mentioned, 4 stories, 16 units. We're going to have one studio. And the importance of that is that it gives us the flexibility that if we want to create an affordable unit, we have the opportunity to do so. And typically, affordable is defined as $1,348 per month. CMHC has not made any stipulations as to how many bedrooms does it have to have, how many square feet. So typically, you'll see that the smallest units are being allocated as affordable units, and you have to have 10% of your buildings. So 10% of 16 is 1.6, and they round up. That means you'd have to have 2. So we've left this open that if you wanted to get this on a CMHC MLI select basis, we could do it all just using CMHC efficiency rules, energy efficiency rules, or we might want to also tag along affordability. And these are the conversations that you would, finesse and fine tune with your architect during that stage. But I'm giving you the idea of what could be done with this property and how you could look at it from a few different angles. We're also going to have 6 one-bedroom plus den and 8 two-bedroom units. The total GFA, gross floor area, is going to be 10,517. As I mentioned earlier, you can see that there's going to be right here a 2-car parking. We're going to have 13 storage lockers, and we're going to have 11 bike lockers or storage spaces inside as well. You're seeing that the city wants to promote less car reliance on cars, and so they're putting more reliance on bikes and making space for bikes, also dealing with garbage. And so I'll show you in the following slides basically how it's being laid out. So regrettably, this is kind of small, but hopefully you can still see it. There's access to the floor here, the ground floor. You have stairs going up and down, and you have an elevator right there. You have the garbage room here shown as dark, and you've got recycling, garbage, and organic waste in there. You've got the mechanical room here, and at the back here on the left, you've got the storage lockers. Some developers actually charge for those. You've got the bike storage area here with a little small bike repair area. Some developers charge for that as well. On level 1, you're going to have a 1-bedroom at the I can't read this, but levels 2 to 4 will be replicated. So level 2, level 3, level 4 will all have the same, whereas on level 1, it's going to have the front unit a little smaller because you're losing this space here for corridor space. Okay. So the trick, the entitlement hack that I was referring to, why can you get 16 units on this property? What makes it so special? Well, there's a chapter of the Planning Act, 415-45.1B, basically says that you have some exemptions, and if you're going through this particular at the same time as you're going through with your building permit, etc., you're able to circumvent the site plan approval process. So anything of 11 units or more suddenly requires a site plan approval. That's why we typically tell clients that your sweet spot is 4 plus 1 to 10. Why 4 plus 1? Because 4 plus 1 equals 5, and 5 is the minimum number of units you need to conform to CMHC MLI Select. Why 10 is the upper unit? Because 10 units and under, you don't need to go for site plan approval. Why don't you want to go to site plan approval? Because it's timely and expensive. You want to avoid that. However, this is one way that's recently developed that's been uncovered that allows people to circumvent that in the sense that you're applying it for you're applying for it at the same time, and because it's an exemption, you're able to do it very, very cost effectively and quickly. So that's how we're able to get a 16-plex on a 50-foot lot. So the change creates a site plan control exemption for certain small, low-rise, new residential buildings, right? If you qualify, you proceed without site plan approval, and that's a time and money that you're saving that in many cases is a deterrent. Many people won't want to go through that. And this is something that has recently been uncovered that is opening up the doors for your clients and for yourselves, those of you who are actually developing, right? So it removes one major city approval from the critical path, a major critical hurdling block, if you will. And why is it being introduced? Well, because the city is realizing that its former way of dealing with things was not conducive to building these missing middle projects, and we are realizing that we are falling far behind um, our ability to meet the housing shortage that we have. And so governments at all different levels are trying to do their best to try and figure out, well, how can we make it a lot easier to build these missing middle. And so we're not going to achieve our goal if all we're doing is pumping out 4+1s. So the question then is, how do we use the city land that we have? How do we take advantage of certain MTSAs, major transit station areas? And that can be defined as a subway, as a GO station, or an LRT. And if you have one of those three, or even all three, that would be trifecta. That would be beautiful if you have all three, but that gives you the ability to get even higher density. Now, again, don't be fooled that going to higher density means more profit. It's not necessarily so. But what I'm trying to show with this example is how the city is changing and how there are opportunities for those that want to build or have financial ability to build these bigger buildings. So what this 415 does not do, it does not grant extra density or height or GFA or setbacks, right? It just allows you to circumvent a certain process. Zoning still governs what you can build as of right, so it doesn't give you anything anything different from that regards. Certain minor variances still apply. You still have to apply through committee of adjustment for those. The interior building code, that doesn't change either. You still have to conform to OBC. So it doesn't change all those things, but what it does is it gives you a track to move more quickly than it did before. So what's the benefit? Well, less time to get your approvals, less costs, and therefore less risk because you have more surety in terms of what you can actually achieve. So what do the numbers look like? Well, in terms of the hard costs, we know what we paid for the land. We now are going to look at, well, what does it cost to build this? So we're looking at the various cost considerations, and without boring you on the actual numbers, detailed structure. I mentioned how LSF is a very cost-effective way to build these. We build our homes out of lumber, stick construction, if you will. But as I mentioned earlier, as soon as we get into these multiplexes, because of fire safety concerns, we have to get into non-combustibles for the load-bearing walls. We don't want to go to concrete. We don't want to go to cinder block. So the hybrid of LSF lumber is the way to go. Why is it a hybrid? Because you'll just use the LSF for the load-bearing walls. The interior walls, which are not load-bearing, just build them out of stick. Just 2x4s, 2x6s, whatever. But that's what we refer to as a hybrid. We're going through a part 3 building. So most of us will build part 9 of the building code. Those are 3 stories and lower. As soon as we hit 4 stories and higher, we hit more expensive part 3. So there's a premium for that. The site finish, we have different types of finishes. We're definitely not going to the luxury end, but we're not going to the cheap end either. So we're looking for standard durable finishes, and that's reflected in the hard costs. So you can see how we're fine tuning the numbers for what we're building. We're not just using very general numbers. The more specific the numbers, the better the results. As the saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. So the more we can the more we can refine the numbers at the earlier stage, the more we can rely on the numbers and less of a variance there will be. Elevator, I mentioned this building will have an elevator, and because it's got 4 stories, it needs it. So that will be included. That would actually help us with the accessibility. Now, we're not making the whole building accessible, but the fact that we're putting an elevator in place gives us some CMHC points based on accessibility. We have 2 garage parking. We are going above and beyond the energy efficiency of Ontario Building Code, and so that's going to get us 50 points right there. We've got civil demo, excavation, and shoring. We've got service upgrades. Again, that 1926 bungalow that was built there years ago had very limited water, sewage, hydro, gas. All these have to be upgraded. And there's, of course, also landscaping. So we've got about $4 million hard cost component to this building. On the soft cost, again, the differentiation between hard and soft is hard is your materials and labor. All the ancillary services, the building permits, the fees, the professional services, whether it's engineering, architects, planners, we refer to those as the soft costs. So here we're breaking down the numbers in terms of what do the soft costs look like. And here we've got the building permit and that whole entitlement process. We got the building permits statutory means as per the city. Development charges. What's interesting is that there are no development charges in the 416 up to 6 units, so that's a good thing. Construction financing, we're typically able to build buildings of this size or less in 12 to 16 months. Financing fees, you have the lender fee plus the mortgage broker fees. There's also premium for the CMHC and insurance, builder's risk policy. We've also got legal, appraisal, and quantity surveyor. So these are all the elements that have to be factored into the soft cost. So you can see we're not just using an arbitrary or kind of a rule of thumb. This is taken to a much deeper level. And again, for the interest of saving time here, I haven't gone into further detail, but you can see that the actual feasibility analysis would be a lot more detailed than what we're showing you very quickly here. So we've got the unit mix on the left, a studio, a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom. We've got storage locker, internet, bicycle parking for a total of the annual revenue. Again, these buildings are predicated, their value is predicated on how much income it can bring in. A simple $100 per month times 12 is $1,200. If we use an easy 4% cap rate, taking the 1,200 divided by the 4% cap rate yields $30,000. So for every $100 we can increase per month, wherever, we're generating $30,000 in value and potentially borrowing up to 95% of that. So you can see how this becomes a very critical aspect of the feasibility analysis, is to understand exactly where we can squeeze every little dollar. So you'll see that developers of these buildings not only look at the revenue from the rental units, from the 1, 2, 3 bedrooms, etc., but also from storage lockers. So in this case, we got 13 storage lockers at $60. In our numbers here, we did not include internet or parking, but internet, let's say you bought internet from Rogers or Bell, for example, and it cost you, I don't know, $600 a month because you got the absolute best, highest, fastest speed, but you're collecting, let's say, $100 from each of the tenants. So there's 16 units times 100, that's $1,600, but it costs you 600. You're netting 1,000 times 12, that's 12,000, that's 300 grand in value. So you can see how the leverage, the cap rate effect really has a profound impact on the valuation. And understanding that relationship is what helps you to design a building that is going to optimize rents, right? So the rent is a function of what the unit offers. It's not just the size. So bigger is not always better in these buildings, which is what typically when we first meet with clients, they initially want to build the biggest possible building, and we have to explain what I just explained to you, that there is a fine um, relationship between the costs, expenses, and valuation. Um, Here, I'm just breaking down the gross income minus vacancy. You could have a fully leased building. CMHC says, I don't care. If I'm going to give you this money and I'm on the hook and I'm insuring this project, I want to build some safeguards for myself. And so some of the ways that CMHC does that is it says, I want a 3% vacancy. And where does it get that? Well, it's not just pulled out of a hat. CMHC has one of the most robust databases in Canada for many, many years. And they know the vacancy of every municipality, the average 1, 2, 3 bedroom, the average vacancy for 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. So here, and this is a number you can quickly look up, but we've used 3% because that's what CMHC has mandated us. And we do these numbers in a manner that if this pencils out, this will be part and parcel of the numbers that we, on behalf of our clients, would actually give to CMHC, who would then review it in getting back to us with a COI, which then gives the client confidence that, hey, not only does this deal make sense, but I now know what kind of financing I can get on the tail end when it's all done. So the income is 483,000 gross minus the 3% vacancy gives us the EGI, the effective gross income. From that, we're going to subtract the expenses of 103,000. I'll show you that later, leading to a net income NOI of 365, right? In terms of what this project cost us, well, the land, 1.9 million, including costs, the closing costs, sorry. So that's land transfer tax and legals. We've got the hard costs, which in a previous slide we showed it was roughly 3.9 million. In the previous slide, we just showed soft costs of 1.6. We always put in a contingency. What is contingency? It basically means we have no idea what's going to happen in the future in terms of strikes, labor strikes, supply chain changes, etc. So we put a bit of safety net, if you will. So the numbers for hard and soft are done to the best of our ability, but then we realize that there's always an error component because we cannot predict the future with more than so much certainty. So that's put into the numbers, and we get a total project cost of 7.7 million. So in red, there is 103,000 for the operating expenses, and here I'm showing you how that's calculated. So again, operating expenses, how do you figure the operating expenses of our building that's not even been built yet? Well, here again, CMHC steps in and gives us guidance. More than guidance, they give us direction. They tell us what we have to use. So there's taxes, insurance, utilities, repair and maintenance. Even though this is a brand new building, CMHC still says, hey, you guys have to use $830 per year per unit. So 830 times 16 is the number that you would input there. Management, if they take this building back and somebody else has to properly manage it, there has to be a line item for that allocation, even though you might decide on completion to manage the building yourself. Salaries, replacement reserve. Replacement reserve deals with the 5 appliances: fridge, stove, dishwasher, washer, and dryer. 5 appliances per unit. CMHC says, heck, at some point, these appliances have to be replaced. I want you to have a reserve fund. So they use 190 per year per appliance in that regard. So you can see how these numbers are not just kind of picked out of a hat willy-nilly. There's real structure behind it. So if we put everything together now, this is what it looks like. I've shown you 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30% takeouts. For the simple reason that even though 95.5 is possible, we're finding that because of Toronto, land is so expensive that it's difficult to really achieve that 95.5. Where we're seeing that happen is in the secondary and especially the tertiary markets around Toronto. The Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloos, Barries, Aurelia, St. Catharines, Hamiltons, these other areas are where you're likely to see the 95.5. In Toronto, regrettably, because of the land component, it's a bit more of a challenge to get that. But even if you can get, 80, 85, you're doing quite well. The numbers make sense. So number one, equity remain. You can see that as the 15, 20% becomes higher, you're leaving more equity into the deal, right? So this is a critical factor to know is how much money do I need? But when all is said and done, how much am I leaving in the deal? And the idea is that typically CMHC will want to see that you've got between 25 and 30% of the project cost. Again, let's go back to that hypothetical $1 million land, $2 million hard and soft, $3 million project cost. They want to see that you've got between 25 and 30%. Let's use 30% to be more conservative. 30% of 3 million is 900 grand. So if you have 900 grand and you're buying a building with that, and it's going to need no more than 30%, 900 grand, you can do this deal. So these are some of the quick tricks that you can do as you're looking at properties to understand what would work for your situation, knowing what your net worth is, knowing what equity you have. Typically, we suggest buy the land in cash. You'll need some money after that for the soft costs to get you to the building permit shovel-ready stage. After that, everything else can be financed. So in this case, you can see, depending on where you are on the sliding scale, how much you'll have to leave in, and also how much you're going to be able to take out through a loan amount. It shows you your annual mortgage debt service down to a monthly, and I'll also show you what the resulting DCR is. Now, with CMHC, they need a 1.1 DCR. Let me explain DCR. Debt coverage ratio or debt service coverage ratio is basically a simple formula that says, hey, for every dollar that you owe me in mortgage commitment, I want to see that you've got at least $1.10 in net NOI. And NOI, again, is net operating income. It's taking gross income, subtracting all expenses, and that's what you're left with before you have to service your debt. So again, CMHC is not a lender, they're an insurer. They want to lend you this money and insure this, sorry, not lend you, they want to insure the money that you're going to be getting from a lender, but they want some surety in return. They want some confidence that you're not going to go bankrupt and all of a sudden they're on the hook. So how do they build some fat in the system? Well, this is another way. They have this DCR or DSCR of 1.1. Now, there's different ratios for different types of properties and different configurations. So for example, if you built a multiplex with a main floor retail, there's different DCRs for that as well. But let's keep things simple. You're building a multiplex, it's going to be 1.1. So basically, the NOI will be divided by 1.1. But you can see that as you're leaving more equity in the deal, your DCR goes up, your cash flow goes up. So in the first scenario with only 10% equity into the deal, you're only getting $3,000 a month in positive cash flow. But you can see if you're leaving 30% in, you're getting $9,000 in positive cash flow. Right? So that's how these numbers pan out, how we evaluate them. So in Toronto right now, CMHC is using 4.25%. I know that because we've recently done some financings that we are in touch with MLI Select people that have confirmed that 4.25 is what they're using right now. So we've shown you a bit of a sensitivity analysis, if you will, saying, well, what if by the time we build this, the cap rates go up a bit to 4.5? What impact would that have on valuation? You can see it's about $500,000. On the other way, end of the spectrum, what if it drops to 4%? You can see the valuation goes up by about 500 grand, right? Remember, our project cost, lands, hard cost, soft cost is 7.7. So in the middle, 4.25 analysis, we have a implied profit. Again, I say implied because we're not selling this property. It really doesn't make sense to sell these properties. The real juice in these properties is A, leverage. You own them for a very small percentage of what they're worth in terms of equity. Two, you have a positive cash flow. Basically, it's the cash flow and increasing value over time that really starts to show benefits. So in essence, this is the way that we look at these projects. Again, what I showed you is a very diluted, very, very summarized version of what we actually provide in terms of deliverables. As I say, there are three different options that a developer typically has with a particular property. You can either go low risk as of right. You're not asking for any more than what you are entitled to by law. Number two is optimal variance, where you decide, not you personally perhaps, but your Architect will say, you know what, if we make a few tweaks here, if we have a different side setback, if we have one less parking requirement, if we can go up another meter height-wise, etc., these minor changes will have a profound effect on the viability of the building. So that costs a bit more. Option three, although we offer it, we don't recommend it. That's something that is left for people with very deep pockets and very long timelines. What we offer is these services for free. Well, not for free. We have people, clients actually pay for them, and if they actually go through with a deal on closing of a particular property, we actually refund them the full amount. So in this way, clients work with us knowing that they have the benefit of not just us as brokers in helping them with site selection and analysis, but also the due diligence and bringing numbers which they can then take to the CMHC and work towards the COI, the certificate of insurance. So that takes me to the end of the presentation. I think I've taken a lot more time than I was expecting, but you can appreciate there's a lot more here behind the scenes that I could go on for much longer. But in the interest of saving time, hopefully I've given you the gist of this whole thing called missing middle, financial analysis, feasibility study, and taking it to an actual example here in Toronto today. So these types of deals are readily available. It's not difficult to find them. It is somewhat challenging to make sure they work, and there's a bit of work, but you can see from the previous slides, this is not a big ticket expense to sift through these various properties. So I will open the chat right now. I've got 66 chats here. I'm not sure if I can answer them all. I think Afshin may have probably answered most of them. What I do want to leave you all with is thank you very much for participating, for your questions. I will try and answer them directly, meaning if any of you have interest in setting up a free complimentary 30-minute Zoom, we're happy to answer any questions, go over any particular property that you're considering, and give you our 2 cents worth on how we see it from our perspective, from our lens, and to give you next steps of what we would do if we were in your shoes. So feel free to take us up on that offer. Again, it's a 30-minute free consultation, no obligation. If you feel comfortable in sharing a particular address, we're happy to do some preliminary digging on that property, to do a preliminary zoning and policy review to see if there's anything that kind of quickly red flags that says this is not a good deal, but we can give you a quick oversight, and I think that would serve you well if you are, brand new to this field and you're just looking to start and get in. Or even if you've worked with a number of other service providers and just haven't nailed down the feasibility side. So happy to do that with you. It's 8:15 almost. And again, I really thank you for participating and open the invite to any questions you have personally, because there's 66 chats there. I don't think I could walk through all of them. So they're definitely worth talking to each of you and talking specifically and privately of any questions you might have. So on that note, thank you very much for attending, and look forward to seeing you at one of our events or talking to you over a Zoom call or at our next webinar. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.